Bill Buckley told the story beginning from his senior year in high school. He said he was a no-name football player from a small town in Mississippi. No college teams were watching him, recording him, or recruiting him. Bill Buckley was not on anyone's list of college prospects. He wasn't on a short list or a long list. However, he was a wide receiver who was in the right place at the right time, and he had a very strong senior season. His high school had a great quarterback and an incredible offensive line, which made the passing attack quite hard to stop and really helped this high school team. Nevertheless, there were no major colleges who were recruiting or watching Bill Buckley. But midway through his senior year, all of that changed for him because suddenly he began to receive phone calls and scholarship offers and visit offers from several major college football players. Bill eventually signed with the Mississippi State University Bulldogs, and he had a successful college career, and he said that experience changed the entire course of his life. It would be years later that Bill would get the whole entire story of what happened during his senior year of high school. You see, there was a man by the name of Henry Lee Parker who was the father of one of Bill's classmates at Starkville High School in Mississippi. Mr. Parker attended several of the Starkville High School games, like many parents do, and Bill just thought that he was another interested parent supporting the football team, supporting the school, and coming to watch a high school football game on a Friday night. However, Bill later discovered that Henry Lee Parker was an NFL scout who regularly visited major college football programs in the South. Bill learned that Mr. Parker was promoting him by taking their high school football films to these colleges, and the Starkville High School team was in these videos that he would take to these coaches. As a result, Bill Buckley received scholarship offers from multiple SEC schools, including Bear Bryant, which is quite an accomplishment. Henry Lee Parker elevated Bill Buckley's game. He saw potential in Bill, and he opened doors of opportunity that Bill could have never opened on his own. Coach Parker is an example of what a Christian life should look like outside of football. Henry Lee Parker, he saw the potential in others, and he connected the potential in others with the right people at the right places. He connected people with opportunities, and Henry Lee Parker elevated Bill Buckley to another level simply because he gave the gift of being present. What a true calling for all of us as Christians, to give the gift of present. Jesus told us that giving the gift of being present in the lives of people is what life is. Ministering to others is what is expected. Ministering to others is not forgotten. Ministering to others is a gift, and God expects us to do this. So look at Hebrews chapter 6, verse 10. I'm going to read from the NASB version today, where it says, "For God is not unjust, so as to forget your work." God is not unjust so as to forget your work and the love which you have shown toward his name. But how did you show that love toward his name? It says, in having ministered and in still ministering to the saints. He said, just being present there for people, taking care of people, helping people, loving people. He said, God is not unjust to forget your work. And that is your work. That is who we are supposed to be. It's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to show love to his name by ministering to other people. I'm so thankful that he gives us this opportunity and knowledge and understanding that when we choose to minister to others, it means something to him. Amen? God will not forget your work. God will not forget your love to others. God sees your love, and God sees how you expressed your love through your ministry to others. And Jesus commanded us and promised us in John chapter 13. In verse 34, he said, "A new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another." And this is the difficult part. He said that you love one another as I have loved you. Don't forget he went to Calvary to show his love. And he says, a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another. How? As I have loved you, that you also love one another. That's a tall order. That's a big ask. Jesus, you went to Calvary and to show your love. You spread your arms open wide. You hung your head and died. And now you're telling me that's the new commandment, that I am supposed to go and love as you have loved? It's a big ask. But then he says this. He says, when you do this, he says, by this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love one to another. That is how people will know that you are a disciple of Jesus Christ. That's how someone will know that you love the Lord, because you have love one to another. And your love, your care, your concern for others is one of the most incredible testimonies and ministries that you can have or give. And remember what the writer of Hebrews said. He said, your work will not be forgotten. How that you showed love to the saints, and how that you showed love to others and ministered to others. People, including me, all kinds of people, want to testify of miracles. We love awesome, incredible miracles. We love to see things that are out of the ordinary. I will never quit testifying how God healed my body of leukemia. I won't. My daughter was blind, and I will not quit testifying about how God gave her sight back to her. And that man walks today because God healed his leg. And there are other miracles in this place. And we want to see those kinds of incredible miracles. I don't know about you, but I would have loved to have seen the Red Sea part. Yeah, I'd love to see the axe head float. I would love to see all those kinds of miracles, and people want to testify of signs and wonders, and those things certainly happen, and we should certainly testify of all the great and mighty, incredible things of God. However, it's very abundantly, incredibly clear that our greatest testimony is our love one to another. Our love one to another is our greatest testimony. It's not only a testimony, it's a commandment. Look at what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 22. He said, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. Everything. All of you. Because if you love God with all of your heart, all of your soul, and all of your mind, your body's not going to have a choice but to also love the Lord. And then Jesus said this. He said, this is the first and the great commandment. And we're okay up to this point. This is a strong ask, but we're still okay up to this point. But it's when he gets to verse 39 and he says, the second is like unto it. He said, thou shalt love thy neighbor as you love yourself. Now it gets more difficult. You expect me to like and love him the way I love myself? Lord, have you lost your mind? There's no way I can love her like I love myself. She gets on every nerve. She is a thorn in my flesh. He bugs me. He drives me crazy. God, he mistreated me. She talked badly about me. And Jesus said, you love that person like you love yourself. And then he said this. He said, these two commandments, loving God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and loving your neighbors like you love yourself. He said, on these two commandments hangs everything. He said, on these two hang all the law and the prophets. When he said it hangs all the law and the prophets, he's saying everything hangs on these two commandments. You must do these two things if you want to make heaven your home. Jesus said the second commandment is like the first commandment. The first is like the second, and the second is like the first. Love others. Give the gift of love. Give the gift of being present. John 15:13. greater love hath no man than this, that a man would lay down his life for a friend. I had no idea that Nick was going to be here today when I thought about this. But police officers and firefighters and EMTs and paramedics routinely lay their lives down for people they do not know. Think about a firefighter who runs into a building to save a body or a person that they've never met before. They're laying their life on the line to rescue someone they have never seen before and may never see again. And Jesus said, no love is greater than your willingness to lay down your own life. So let me take you back to my illustration, Mr. Henry Lee Parker and Bill Buckley. One of the coolest things about the story with Mr. Parker is that he never made a show of it. Bill Buckley did not know what he had done until years later. Someone else had to tell Bill Buckley what Mr. Parker had done for him. Mr. Henry Lee Parker never said, do you know what I did for you? Why didn't you give me credit when you were receiving your awards? He never made a show of it. Have you ever met people like that? I love people like that. But have you ever met people that make a show of everything they do? They make a big deal that they even showed up. Mr. Henry Lee Parker, he just quietly was present for Bill Buckley. He just simply showed up for that young high school football player. He came to the games. He recorded some film. And then, when the right opportunities presented themselves, Mr. Henry Lee Parker very quietly and subtly promoted the high school wide receiver, Bill Buckley. There was no show. There were no letters. There were no awards. There was just a whole lot of showing up. There was just a whole lot of being there for somebody. He was present, and he gave the gift of being present. And so that's all he just did that. He was just there for somebody. Being a humble Christian means recognizing we're not here to see how important I can become. Instead, being a humble Christian means we are here to see how much difference we can make in the lives of others. If living for God was all about me and only me, then when I was saved, the Lord might as well take my life and take me on to heaven. Because what else would there be? It's not just about me. During this season of Christmas, I want to be one of those people, and I'm asking you to be one of those people that really makes the season about loving other people. How much can I do for somebody else? How much can I help someone? How much can I be there for someone? There are some people in my life that I just want present with me. I don't need them sitting in my office with me. I just want to know they're in my life because they're a blessing to me. How much can I do for someone else? So I want to tell you about a miracle that took place when we were adopting Jacob. And I've told you bits and pieces of this before, but I'm going to give you some details about one particular event that took place when we were adopting Jacob. When we adopted Jacob, this really cool thing happened to us because there's a lot that goes into international adoption. And one of the most difficult parts about the international adoption is going through the immigration process. It's a whole lot easier to cross the border down south than it is to adopt a child. There's a lot of paperwork that goes into adopting internationally that you don't have to do to adopt a child domestically. There's a lot of proof of citizenship that is required. I was born here, have lived here all my life. And at that point, it only left the country one time, and I still had to prove I was a citizen to adopt a child from another country. My wife had to prove she was a citizen. We had to prove that Anna was a citizen, and she was only 9 years old. There were stringent and deep background checks we had to give them every address where we had ever lived in our lives, including from the time we were born until the very moment that we were adopting Jacob. It was rough. It was difficult to remember and find all that information. We had to have visits to immigration offices that felt more like black sites than they did office buildings. We had interviews. And one day, per the instructions that I had received, I called Immigration Services for one of our telephone meetings. And when the person answered my call, she told me she gathered all my pertinent information, and then she said, "Mr. Williams, your case has been flagged and is being elevated to a higher level." I was surprised, and I was also very naturally concerned. It worried me. But then she told me, she said, "But Mr. Williams, I'm going to stay on the phone with you until we have connected you to the correct department and the right people." And so in that little gesture, there was the gift of her being present. She didn't put me on hold and transfer me and me get transferred all over the place. She did not just toss me off to the wind and hope that I got the right person. No, she did not give me the runaround. She stayed on the phone with me until she was positive that she had connected me to the right person in the government. That in itself is a miracle. So when the right person answered the phone, the two immigration officials, they discussed our case and they shared my vital information, the pertinent information regarding the adoption and so forth. And that is when I was informed, and the next person said, "Mr. Williams, your case has been flagged and you have been marked as high priority." Well, I don't have a special name and I didn't have any special money. I didn't know anybody official. And so I had no idea what was happening. How in the world, other than God, did I get flagged and did we get flagged high priority? The immigration office official notified me our adoption would be fast-tracked and handled by immigration people at the very highest levels. I was surprised. And I did not ask for any of this special treatment, and I certainly did not expect any of this special treatment, and neither did she. And we were a little overwhelmed and somewhat concerned as to how and why this was happening, because you don't ever want to be on the government's radar. And that's kind of how we felt in this moment, like we were on the government's radar. Now, some of you will remember Reverend Tom Veely. He came and spoke to us here in our church, and he's the president of New Beginnings Adoptions, the organization that helped us adopt Jacob. So I called him and I told him about what had happened with Immigration Services, and I told him about these phone calls and being placed on high priority, and so that's when he told me. He said, "Do you remember when you were with me at our United Pentecostal Church General Conference, and you came and you were talking to me at the booths?" And I said, "Sure I do." And he said, "Well, we were in that open area, and there's all kinds of booths and people coming and going, and what you did not know was who was present there behind you." And I'm like, "I don't have any idea what you're talking about." He said, "Standing right behind you was a high-level immigration government official listening to your story." So he heard there about our adoption. And when I was gone, he went and talked to Reverend Tom Veely, and he asked him all the necessary information. He took notes, and he got our information, and he flagged our account and made our account high priority. He never made a show of it. I have never figured out who the person was. I cannot give him credit for it or her credit. I don't know who this person is. But they just showed up and they were present for us and they made a difference in our lives. He gave us the gift of being present, even when we did not know he was present. Now, it doesn't end there. This is why it's so incredibly important that you give the gift of being present. Because nobody knew what was going to happen next. It turned out incredibly important that this happened because it allowed us to finish Jacob's adoption in half the time it normally takes. They told us it would take up to 18 months to finalize his adoption, and we finished his adoption in 9 months. And this is incredibly important because international adoptions from Poland closed right after we adopted Jacob. we would have lost Jacob. We would have not been able to adopt our son. We would not have been able to go and get him if we had waited one more month. We have friends who live in Illinois who were adopting 3 siblings from Poland like a month or 2 after us, who lost their adoption and could not finalize the process because they had closed the international adoptions in Poland. So it matters that that man or lady, whoever it was, showed up and was standing behind me and made a difference in our lives even when I had no clue we would have lost our son. The courts closed international adoptions from Poland after we got Jacob. And I know it was a miraculous gift from God, but there was someone who was present for us when we needed someone to be present. Someone was willing to be present, and someone was willing to give. That person never had to make that phone call. We would have never known they were even there. That person never had to flag our account. We would have never known that they were there. But it was intentional. It was on purpose. And intentionally present does not happen by accident. Being present for somebody doesn't just happen. And the Apostle Paul told the church in Romans 15, verse 5, he said, "Now the God of patience and consolation grant you to be like-minded one toward another." To be like-minded one toward another according to Christ Jesus. What does it mean to be like-minded one towards another? Well, I want you to go back to verse 1, and I'm going to read it from the English Standard Version. It says, "We who are strong have an obligation." Are you strong? We who are strong have an obligation to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. This is Paul talking to us as saints. He says, you and I who are strong have an obligation to bear the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. And then he says this, let each of us please his neighbor, the one Jesus told us to love, like you love yourself. He said, let each of us please his neighbor for his good. Why? To build him up, like Mr. Lee Parker did for Bill Buckley. Build him up, promote him, support him, make him feel like he's somebody. If you are wondering, what can I do to be more like Jesus? The answer simply is to love others like you love yourself, to be present for others how you want people to be present for you, to show up for others, just to give the gift of being present in somebody's life. I want to be that person that people can say, he was there for me. I desperately want people to know he prays for me. And not because I tell them that I pray for them, but because they feel the power of those prayers. There's nothing about any of this that gives you or me permission to be nosy. This doesn't give us permission to be in other people's business, to be busybodies. Being present and being a busybody, a nosy person, those are two different things. I can come up to you and tell you, the Lord laid you on my heart and I'm praying for you without asking you what's wrong. And if you want to come to me and say, I'd like to talk to you about what's wrong, I'd like to pour my heart out for you, then being present and then being polite enough to keep it private. What a blessing. How many times have you wanted to pour your heart out, but you didn't and you couldn't because you didn't know who you could trust to keep your business private? Mr. Henry Lee Parker was present for Bill Buckley. He never interfered with the business of the coaching at the high school. The high school coaches never heard Mr. Henry Lee Parker saying, you need to throw the ball more to Bill Buckley so I can have more videotapes of him. He let the football coach of the high school coach the football team. Mr. Henry Lee Parker, he never showed up at Bill Buckley's house making all kinds of promises or bragging about who he was and how he was sharing these tapes of his football games. No, he was simply present, and then when he had the right opportunities, he blessed Bill Buckley, and he gave something to that man's life, and he never knew it until someone told him many years later. But his entire actions of just giving the gift of being present changed Mr. Bill Buckley's life. And because of that, Bill Buckley got an education from an excellent school, and he's now the FCA chairperson for the state of Mississippi. You never know what little actions can make a difference in the lives of people. Not in my notes, but I hope I say this correctly. There's a little action that I'm gonna give you two, and there are more than this in this church, but I'm gonna give you two. Please don't be offended. I can't stay here all day giving examples for everyone, but I'm gonna give an example, Sister Logan. Anytime we have something, she makes sure that she makes a food that my wife can eat. Now, unfortunately for my wife, she's allergic to half the food on the planet. She can't have cinnamon or eggs or soy or gluten. I don't even know why you bother living if you can't eat all that. But there's this cool thing of just showing up with an extra dish of gluten-free brownies, an extra dish of gluten-free macaroni and cheese. And then the other I'm going to tell you is, I've told you this before, but Sister Peters, when your daughter is going blind and you're pulling up to the eye doctor's office with your daughter who is so strong and so brave but simultaneously so scared because you know they're getting ready to put all kinds of needles in her eyes. And right before you go in, you get a text message from Sister Peters that says, "Just want you to know I'm praying for you right now." Just being present. Just being present in that moment of need. You never know what little actions can make the differences in the lives of people. We have this promise from God. God said, "For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord. Thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end." But we must take the journey, and this journey is a better journey when people give you the gift of being present. This journey is a better journey when you're not alone. And in Genesis, Joseph was abandoned by his brothers, and they threw him in a pit, and they sold him in slavery, and they pushed him there, and they shoved him here. And Joseph was all alone in a foreign country. But you remember how Joseph interpreted the dreams of the butler and the baker. And Joseph told the butler, he said, "Think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house." Joseph was asking the butler, "Please be present for me when you get the opportunity to be present." And as Joseph had promised, their dreams came to pass, and the baker was hanged, and the butler was restored to the palace. You see that in verse 12, and it was several years later, but finally the butler had the chance to be present for Joseph. The butler, he made the difference, and yes, we know that God directed Joseph's paths, and we're thankful for that. Yes, we know what Paul said, that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. But in all situations, God uses people. So go back to our text of Hebrews chapter 6, verse 10. "For God is not unjust, so as to forget your work and the love which you have shown toward his name, in having ministered and in still ministering to the saints." God asks us that we give the gift of being present. And he promised us. In Isaiah chapter 40, verse 11, he said, "Like a shepherd, he will tend his flock. In his arms he will gather the lambs and carry them in his bosom. He will gently lead the nursing ewes." You see, God is gently caring for us. God is carrying us close to his heart. And Jesus promised us in Matthew, he said, "Lo, I am with you always, even until the end of the world." And we have this promise from the Psalms where it says, "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in time of trouble." You see, it is a godlike attribute to be present for others. We constantly see God is there for you, and you being there for somebody else is you acting like God. So today, on this first Sunday of December, this Christmas season, give the gift of being present. In reference to the Good Samaritan who helped the wounded traveler. The Good Samaritan did not know the wounded man. He didn't know where he came from or where he was going. But Jesus said, certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he was present there for him. He had compassion on him. And he went to him. He made himself present. And he bound up his wounds, pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his beast and brought him to an inn and took care of him. He was present for that man. And on the morrow when he departed, he took out 2 pence and gave them to the host and said unto him, take care of him, and whatsoever thou spendest more, when I come again, I will repay thee. And so Jesus asked us the question. He said, now which now of these 3, the 2 who passed by and was not present, or the Good Samaritan, said, which now of these 3 thinkest thou was the neighbor, the one who loved like I have commanded you to love? Would you stand with me today? So during this Christmas season, I can think of no greater gift to give than that we all obey the Word of God, to give the gift of being present